Notice is hereby given that the governing body of the above named authority will be attending a special meeting to be held Wednesday, 20th day of February, 2019 at 6 p.m. at City Hall, Asherton City Hall building located at 1001 Carter Street, Asherton, Texas, at which time the following subject will be discussed to it. Call to order. Norma Raza.
Present.
Ed Bustamante.
Present.
Max Silva Jr. Present. Ricardo Colon. Pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, discussion, action for city of Asherton 2018 audit.
Mr. Condon is here to do a presentation of some of the items of regarding the 2018 audit.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead and start. All right. If you have it in front of you here, the table of contents goes over the report. It starts with the auditor's report on page 1 and 2. Goes over the basic financial statements. The fund financial statements require supplementary information in the footnotes and the schedule of findings. So it goes from page 1 to page 41. And so that's what we're going to go over tonight. The page 1 is the actual audit report. And if you look at the bottom of the first page, it says, we believe the audit evidence we obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our opinion. And the opinion was unmodified. We found no material misstatements. We did find some internal control issues that we'll address at the end. This report here is broken down into the report itself, the management's responsibility of the financial statements on page 1, and the auditor's responsibility. So if you look at the management's responsibility, management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of these financial statements in accordance with the accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. This includes the design, implementation, and maintenance of internal control relevant to the preparation and fair presentation of financial statements that are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. So that's the city's responsibility to produce us the financials that we then did the audit and the test work on. And like I said, there were no material misstatements, and but the financial statements we're going to go over are the city's, not mine. I mean, we didn't create these. We audited what we were given. On the top of page 2, it goes into our opinion, which it states that it was unmodified, which is the best you can get. There's only 3 or 4 opinions, and they don't go from good to medium. They go from good to bad, and you were good, so that worked out well. The required supplementary information is in the other matters. The main part of that is the management's discussion and analysis on pages 3 through 7. That we're going to go over first in just a minute. We don't express an opinion on the management discussion. That's your discussion, recapping the financials. We audited the financials. We then have other information as shown on page 2 that breaks down into what else is attached to the report, which is schedules about the budget, schedules about the utilities, your service area, that type of thing. Finally, on the bottom of page 2, the prior period financial statements were audited by other auditors, and they also expressed an unmodified opinion last year. So anything you see with 17 would come from your financials for last year. On page 3, the actual discussion, it's broken down into this first page here is the financial highlights. We didn't get into the funds. The assets, if you look at the top, the first bullet, The assets of the city of Asherton exceeded its liabilities at the close of the 2018 fiscal year by $2,150,412, which is your net position. So since the city started with zero, put money in the bank, gone through all the activity you've done all these many years, you're now $2,150,000 in equity. Of this amount, $1,316,959 may be used to meet the city's obligations to citizens and creditors. The second bullet goes into the general funds, has a fund balance of $700,139. The third bullet is the unassigned general fund of $649,397. Okay, then talks about the net position and statement of activity we're going to go over next. So that takes us to page 4. Talk about the fund financial statements. The important parts here are your governmental funds, followed by the proprietary funds. Proprietary funds are business funds, treated just like any other business versus the government. The proprietary funds is the utility, the water and the sewer. But then we'll talk about the notes to the financial statements. On page 5, we have the summary of net assets, and it's a pretty busy schedule, so rather than going over every single figure, it's broken down into the governmental activities in the first 2 columns comparing 18 to 17. Then the business type activities, which is the utility, comparing 18 to 17, totals it and shows the amount of the change. So if you look at the change, your assets went up $151,232, which is good for your assets to go up. Over half of that is your capital assets in the utility fund, where you had work in progress on 3 different construction in progress on 3 different projects, and we picked that up, and that increased your assets. Long-term liabilities, your total liabilities went up $61,000, and your net position went up $212,000. So the city reported positive balances in both positions. On page 6, it's the same type of schedule, but now we're into the profit and loss, where you have the governmental activities, the business type activities, and the amount of change. The figures are the same, the $212,980, but if you look at page 7, I think it's the easiest page in the whole audit, is it gives you a pie chart of your governmental revenues and where they came from. Your state and county taxes, 11%, franchise fees, 17%, miscellaneous 2%, charge for service, 4%, property taxes, 26%, and sales and use tax, 40%. And then where did the money go? Public works, 9%, public safety, 10%, and general government, 81%. So these different percentages are backed up by page 6. These figures on page 6 drive the pie chart. On page 8, it gets into the capital assets at the top, which what I was talking about just a second ago, is the city investments in capital assets, net of accumulated depreciation for governmental and business type activities as of June 30th was $791 and $1,000,003 respectively versus last year, $810 and $1264. Long-term debt has gone down because of your payment of the long-term debt. Okay, on page 9, it gets into the more historical type of financial statements that cities have versus the management discussion we just looked at. The statement of net position has your governmental activities, business type activities in total. So the total current assets combining government and business is $1,255,566. Capital assets at $2,094,959. So your total assets are $3,350,000. If you take that right-hand column and slide down, you see the $2,150,000 at the bottom, which was the first figure we were talking about. So that $2,150,000 that the city has grown to have is made up of $3,350,000 in assets and $1,200,000 in liabilities, giving you a net positive, which is very good. Very good, so. Page 10 is into the statement of activities. You notice it get there again on the bottom right, in the third column, $2,154,12. The way you get there is by taking all of your activity for the current year of $215,377 was the positive. Over on the bottom right, last column, the fourth number up, that's your positive management profit for the year, $215,377. That includes all the gives and takes of the government funds and the business fund. On page 11, it gets into the governmental funds versus showing them both together. This is just the government. And it breaks down the governmental funds of general, cemetery, and debt service. And the total assets of $816,623, less liabilities over on the right-hand column of $44,493, gives you your total fund balance of $700,139. So your total government is part of the $2,000,001, of course, and it's $700,139. The debt service fund, we're going to talk about in a minute, ended up with cash of $40,000. There was a change in practice from last year to this year, where funds were actually deposited in there, but the bills were paid out of general. So we mentioned that in the audit. Talked to Adrian about it in some detail, and it was approved, and it was a change that you were all aware of, but I needed to note it because it was different from last year. Page 12 is a reconciliation between the numbers. Of course, the biggest piece there is going to be your capital assets, less your appreciation. So this page is a reconciliation page. We've already talked about the details. Page 13 is the changes, is the statement of revenues and expenditures. There again, this is a governmental fund, general, cemetery, and debt service. If you look at your total revenue of $240,000, $203 came from general. Out of that $203,827 in the first column, property taxes was $63,000, sales and use tax $95,000, franchise fee of $40,000. So we've talked about these figures in the first 5 or 6 pages, but now we're just breaking them down into more detail. Instead of a general governmental fund, we're showing you the figures itself. You notice in the debt service fund is $26,870 in state and county taxes, and last year that was in the general fund. So that was the note I was making a minute ago. So your total fund balance is the $700,139 on page 13, last column over to the right. There again, page 14 is another reconciliation. We've already talked about the figures. Biggest piece there is depreciation again. And instead of talking about the government fund on page 15, we start talking about the utility fund. So we're breaking it down again. Instead of showing it all together, we're breaking it down into the business part. Your total assets, total current assets of $481,771, of which cash is $410,000 on the top of page 15, and accounts receivable is $71,281. Accounts receivable is broken down into all of your different water and sewer utility users on your computer in the office in there. All the different people owe you $71,000. Of that, most of it was deemed collectible. Not much bad debt. Capital assets, which is your utility plant, water plant is $1,303,537. That includes the work in process on the 3 construction jobs. Your liabilities are $739,448, which is broken down into what you owe the other funds of $594,221. So throughout the years, as you were growing the water utility business, you were borrowing money from the other funds, and that's what that $594 is. And we reconcile that and a couple pages that we're gonna be coming to in a minute. Your bonds payable of $459,000, of which one was refinanced right after the end of the year, and you went into the HUD. It was a HUD, Adrian, the next grant? The next grant in July?
That was part of the USDA.
USDA? Okay, USDA started in July. So that's gonna be on the next audit. It paid off one of these bonds in there. So your unrestricted utility fund is $586,860. There again, that's what you've earned since the beginning of time. On page 16, it breaks down your revenue. Your water is $352,033, sewer $143,510, solid waste of $93 for a total of $588,211. Your personnel, other services, and supplies, giving you an operating income of $150,000. You paid $23,000 in interest on the bonds and the notes, coming down to a net income of $126,930. On page 17, this is your cash flow, where it shows you actually increased your cash for the year. You ended up with $410,490, which was the figure we just talked about. Then on page 18, we start the actual notes, and there again, like I said in the beginning, when we looked at the auditor's report, these are your footnotes. We audited them and verified them with Adrian and the other auditor. The reporting city of Asherton, you notice draft, you've seen draft on every page. The reason we're doing a draft is on the auditor findings, we're waiting on your response. When we prepared the audit, we put some responses in quotes. You can use those or not, it's up to you. And once you get us the final response, which would be unaudited by us, we'll then put those into the audit and then issue the final. So as soon as we get that from you, you'll get the final the next day, or within a day or two.
I had already responded back.
Yeah, you responded, you received the draft, but we need to, yeah, I got your email, I sure did, I appreciate that. So the city of Asherton defines your history and government-wide and fund financial statement, and the statement of activities, it gets into the details we talked about. I think the important part on page 18, actually it's the very last paragraph, is that your financial statements are on the accrual basis. That means you don't pick something up when you receive the cash, or pick something up when you pay it out. You pick it up when it's due to you, or when you owe it. So the timing of your cash payments don't play a part in this. The actual timing of the activity is what determines it. On page 19, talk about the fund equity. The city reports fund balances for the governmental funds and classifications based primarily on the extent to which the city is bound to honor constraints on the specific purposes for which amounts in these funds can be spent. So the only restricted funds are going to be the debt service fund. All your other assets are free to be used. On page 20, it breaks down the funds one more time, just in a different way. If you look at the fund types and major funds, the general fund reports as the primary fund of the city. This fund is used to account for all financial resources not reported in other funds. Special revenue funds accounts for specific revenue sources that are legally restricted to expenditures for specific purposes. And then the debt service fund accounts for revenue generated expenditures made for the retirement of long-term debt. Utility fund is your business fund. Breaks down on the bottom of page 20 how you depreciate buildings over 40 years, utility plant over 40 years, and furniture, machine and equipment 5 years. Page 21 talks about your cash and your investments and the different credit risks, custodial risks, and we're going to go over those in just a minute, so we'll talk about that in a second. Page 22 Look at the top, your concentration of credit risk, limit the risk of loss attributed to the magnitude of the government's investment in a single issuer to city investments in both depository bank certificates and state-sponsored investment pools. So if, as long as you're under, that just talks about being over the FDIC limit where you won't have your cash insured. You don't have any foreign currency. Property taxes on the bottom of page 22, which is footnote C, talks about the enforceable liens, the general property taxes, the dollar amount, how much is the levy and what your current collections were, which were 72.86%, which is the last sentence on page 22, and we're going to go over that in a minute as well, in more detail. Your capital assets on page 23, the top section is the governmental funds. There was no activity there other than depreciation. The bottom section is the business type activities, which is your utility. You see depreciation of the 47,238. You added, right kind of toward the middle of the page, $86,613. Almost all of that was your engineering consulting firm that was doing various in-process work on your 3 projects. Very little hard assets in that. It's almost all consulting and the work that they did. From the top of page 24, it breaks down the depreciation between government and business and the type, which entity actually had the depreciation. Biggest of which was the sewer at 31,632. Middle of page 24 is the long-term debt. Breaking it down, going from 692 less the 117 you paid, coming out with 575,000. That's the balance due. It then breaks down the different water works and sewer systems. Water works series 1980 is 5%. Certificate of Origins 2004 is 3.6 to 5.9, and total notes 2016 is 2.95. And that's the interest we talked about earlier, how much you paid for the year. Top of page 25 breaks down your future payments by year. The bottom of page 25, there is no retirement payment. Page 26 has really three important footnotes. They're all important, but G talks about you're involved in various legal proceedings, or you could be related to personnel, property damages, and other items. All arise in the ordinary course, nothing extraordinary. City administration, in consultation with legal counsel, is of the opinion that city liabilities in any cases, if decided, will not be material. Contingencies in the normal course of operations, the city receives grant funds from federal and state agencies. The grant programs are subject to audit to ensure compliance with conditions present to the granting of the funds. Management does not believe any liabilities will arise as a result of these audits. And then the inter-fund receivables, what we talked about a second ago, where the top section is due from, and the bottom section is due to. So your general fund has a due from the utility fund of the $551.42. And down at the bottom right, the second column, is where the utility fund owes the general fund. So they all zero out. The left and right column are $637,049. This breaks down, for instance, the debt service fund has a receivable from the utility fund. The cemetery fund has a receivable from the debt service fund, as small as it is. So this gives you an overshot of the other, instead of looking at each individual financial statement, you get a recap page. On page 27, this is your utility fund, the business fund again, and it summarizes what we've already talked about. Your current assets are $1,700,000, total assets are $1,785,000, less liabilities for your unrestricted of $586,860. Breaks down your revenues and bigger the figures, coming down to your net position of $586,860, which we talked about in other detail. Page 28, risk management. Where if there are losses, they're reasonably insured, management has no concern. During the past 3 years, no settlements have exceeded the insurance. Subsequent events, the city and council has reviewed subsequent events through January 15th. So the report is dated January 15th. We had just about everything we needed at that point in time to make an opinion. There was a list of, I guess, maybe 10, 15 other items we needed. We got those last week. And they're not material, but we just had to have them to check off the list to go through the audit process, most of which were expenditures this year. So we had to go through this year all the way through January to make sure, see if we found anything that went back into last year, which we did. We found some, nothing material, but there was 5, 6, 7,000 that we put back into last year from expenditures in this current year. Footnote M, use of estimates. You have estimates in here quite a bit. Number one is the condition of your assets. Are they impaired or are they not? The life of the assets, your bad debts, your collectability of the receivables. So there are quite a few estimates that you've made in coming up with the financial statements. And the key there is that actual results could differ from those estimates. Something could happen that could have a major impact that would change your estimates, so they're not guaranteed. On the required supplementary information, on page 29, this is where we have your budget. We have the original budget, the revised budget, the total actual, and the variance. And this is your general fund. So your total revenue was $212,595 budgeted. You came in at $203,827, and you're under revenue by $8,768. However, on expenses, you were under budget on expenses by $72,170, mainly in the general government fund. So because of that, you ended up being a positive versus a budget of $63,402. So a little shortfall in revenue, but way under the expenses. On page 30 is your coverage ratio. It's gone way up. Last year it was negative, this year it's positive too. So that's good when you calculate your operating revenue and your revenue available compared to what bond debt you have to pay. Your 2.15 to be good. A while ago we talked about the percentage that you collected during the year on page 31. If you look when you started this year all the way back to 6/30/07 and prior, you had 61,382 in outstanding tax revenue. 201,031 was the current year levy. You had adjustments of 8,185, collections of 87,116. So that left you a balance outstanding of 64,798. The total outstanding after the current year collections makes it 102,845. The balance is to the balance sheet. On page 32 is your metered water sales information. This is one of the covenants that you have to do in order to comply with your liabilities, where you had 467 water connections, 437 sewer connections, 36,382 gallons sold, 63,749 gallons pumped, and then the average consumption per connection. And that's what your bondholders want to see. On page 33, this is our comments on your bond and note liability. It says one requirement of the city's bond covenant is that the city establish a bond reserve account equal to the average annual debt service requirement. The city funded the account immediately upon receiving the proceeds of the bond. In our audit of the financial statements of the city of Asherton, Texas, as audited for the year ended June 30th, 2018, we have determined that the city has adhered to bond covenant requirements and compliance as of June 30th, 2018, other than completing the audit within 60 days of year end. So that is a violation of one of the covenants. The city has requested a waiver of this covenant. And I guess Adrian's working on that now. I saw an email where they're working on it. So you are that one violation there. The audit is due by 8/31. Yeah. I know
Yeah, I
last
was
year-
not aware of the violation until very right now. It was never been, someone had never mentioned anything about being in a violation.
It ended in June. It ended in 9 months.
Yeah.
So it ends in June and you have to get the audit done by no later than August?
Yeah, but that's when you pay off. Yeah, so that's because, I guess it's just an older bond issue, because I've never seen anything in 60 days. It's always 6 months, you know, at least 6 months. But that was such a quick trigger, I was just really surprised to see, you know, how quick it was, so. But anyways, it's in there, so I thought I'd mention it. But they haven't done anything about it, so. Page 34 is the elected officials, mayor, the 2 commissioners. And so now, after all of that, we've gone over all the financials for the government funds, the utility funds, all of the footnotes. And that's what we would consider generally accepted accounting principles. But now you have to get into the governmental auditing. And that's the rest of the discussion tonight, is what the governmental auditing board requires us to do. First of all, we have to issue a second report. In addition to the first report we went over, the second report is talking about your internal control over financial reporting. We did not audit the internal control. All we did was look at what you do and compare it to what you need to do, but we didn't say it was good or bad. We looked at it as to what the government says you should be doing. And so let's see here. If you look at page 36, it says the purpose of the report is to describe the scope of our testing of internal control and compliance and the results of that testing, and not to provide an opinion of the effectiveness. This report is an integral part of the audit performed in accordance with government auditing standards, considering the city's internal control and compliance. According to this communication, is not suitable for any other purpose. So what we wanted to go over starts on page 37. Gets into the findings, and this would be considered internal control deficiency. And the next 4 pages is where we need your response, and then we can issue the final. The first one, it talks about the management is responsible for establishing and maintaining internal control. A good system of internal control provides for adequate segregation of duties so no one individual handles a transaction from its inception to completion. I talked to Adrian about this in detail when I was here, 2 or 3 times I was here. And you have few staff, and a lot of cities are the same way. And so when we look at the cities, they have minimal staff because of the requirement to take, to run the government, but you don't have an overabundance of people, not like some private companies may. And so you do the best you can with what you got, and you did a great job. I think you did, but there's still some deficiencies that I need to note. But I want to give you that positive that you do a great deal with a few. So I'm surprised they even stopped for lunch when I was here. So, but they do, but that's good. But yeah, they do good work. So this isn't meant to be critical or negative, only what I saw. The first condition is 1 or 2 individuals have control over each of the following areas: cash, reconciling bank, initiating cash receipts, handling and recording cash. 2, receipts. And this was one of the concerns was you don't have a lot of folks handling the collecting and the depositing and the posting and the reconciling. So if I was going to break something out, I'd figure how to break number 2 out between different people, so you have a control over it. Not one person doing every task. 3, the accounting system performing all general accounting functions and having custody of the city assets. 4, disbursements, preparing checks, signing checks, and access to the accounting records. And 5, petty cash, custody, reconciling, and recording. We have a petty cash comment we're gonna go over in a minute. So the recommendation is the city review its control activities to obtain the maximum internal control possible. And the response that we put in quotes, not to put words in your mouth, but this is what we've seen in the past, is the city responded with the city and related entities will review its control procedures to obtain the maximum internal control possible with the limited staff it has. And then the conclusion would be acknowledged. Accounts payable control, criteria, accounts payable invoices from vendors are being processed with no formal purchasing system. That's again because of the quantity of people. Accounts payable invoices from vendors are being processed with no indication of approval, although I know you signed the checks. If you just look at the invoice by itself, no indication of approval, there's no indication of fund to charge or what account to put it in. So I think the bookkeeper gets with Adrian to go through and put things in the right places. But what we saw, it would be difficult to do that, to make sure it's in the right place. Accounts payable vendor statements are being paid, statements should not be used, and payments should be made from approved, coded, and stamped invoices. Once paid, invoices are not stamped paid nor dated. Numerous invoices tested for accounts payable were not in the files provided. Quotes for comparison purposes were not in the files. Condition, although the city's software generates monthly reports of payment, controls are needed. Cause, policies have not been established and procedures have not been implemented to ensure purchases are properly documented. So the top of page 38, the response, the city will ensure accounts payable reconciliations are properly supported and reviewed. The reviewer will initially date the document the review. Everything that's in quotes. Petty cash. We counted the petty cash. You have a general ledger account for petty cash. There's a financial statement for petty cash, but it fluctuates. And you're supposed to have an imprest fund where you say $250 is in petty cash. And what we're gonna do is, our cash drawer may go up to $2,000, but at the end of the day, it's gonna go back to $250, and we're gonna put the money in the bank type of thing. And so when we counted the petty cash, it had $1,900 in it. That was different in the general ledger anyways. It was not balanced. There is adopt a formal written policy regulating the use of city petty cash. And also we noticed there was one petty cash, but it was mixed between the funds, between government and utility. So we need to either have 2 petty caches or no petty caches, but I wouldn't have mix them. Makes it too difficult. And the response, we are working on procedures. On the computer system, what we noticed there was the backups. We would recommend that you go to some type of cloud backup. We use Carbonite, which is very inexpensive. It backs up everything to the cloud. Something happens, hurricane, flood, tornado, whatever, all your files are in the cloud. You may leave on Friday with no computers, but you come back Monday, you go buy a computer at Office Depot, you turn it on and you download the files. But right now, Adrian said you're using a thumb drive, and that thumb drive may even be kept here. It should be taken home, but it may be even kept here. So everything's in one place. We recommend that you change that you look at some type of disaster recovery plan. If something were to happen, how would you bill your water? How would you stay in business? How would you collect your money? Having a virus protection, a firewall, that type of thing. And so the response there is in quotes again, you can read over that. The financial adjustments, what we saw there's something called director's report. And so if you look at the weakness in internal controls with the utility, and then you look at this director's report, where $24,090 was written off, it was hard to identify what that was. We saw in the board minutes where you went through and you approved disbursements and you approved different activities of the government, but we couldn't really see, and we saw where you approved bad debts actually, but we couldn't really see where those monthly adjustments were approved. And so it's still a question that we have. It's called director's report. It wasn't enough to change the audit, but it is enough to mention that we'd recommend that every month they be put into the board minutes, city council minutes, as to what you're writing off and not.
The
So-
24,000 was for the sewer, when we changed that month that we changed the sewer rates.
Yeah.
Remember when we did?
Oh, that 1 month when you,
They
when
went
you,
up, 'cause they were real high, yeah, I remember.
So we did that one-time
They adjusted,
adjustment, yeah. That totaled up to that.
All right, then, let's see, the last, next to last is on payroll taxes, F. What we found there was that, well, here, we'll just read it, instead of me trying to recap it. That the properly designed system of internal control over financial reporting includes the preparation of the entity's financial statements and notes. On payroll tax returns and deposits made, a refund was due for Q3 of 2017. So you overpaid $1,363. And that was carried over to the next quarter. However, the next quarter was paid full without taking that credit. And we couldn't find where the money came in. So we don't know where the money went or what happened with the government. There was a journal entry made reclassing part of it, but there again, it wasn't enough to change the audit, but it is enough to be concerned about, because if you overpaid one quarter, it should stay on your 941s until it's gone. It shouldn't just disappear. And then deposits for Q1 2018 were $10,187, and the 941 reflected $8,795. So you paid more than you owed, but you didn't have a carry forward credit. So the government must have some, the IRS must have some credit for you that needs to be looked into. So we saw 2 quarters that didn't balance, and we couldn't find where the funds were refunded to the city. The last comment we had was on deposits, meter deposits G on page 41. You collect deposits when you turn on the meters, but there's no liability, there's no list of names in the financial statement. So it appears that you're just taking the meter deposits to income, but they're not income, they're liability, and you should have a list that backs up the general ledger as to who you owe. I don't know how much it is, it's gone on for many years, so I didn't question anything, but almost everybody, every city audit has utility deposits that you keep up with by name. Just like you know what they owe you, you know what you owe them. So if somebody comes in with and they're leaving the city and they want the deposit back, you just go to the computer and refund the money.
so right now, there's no track of deposits.
Not that we could find, not in the
They're
financial statement.
listed as meter deposits. It doesn't have a name to
Anybody
it.
else?
But
You know, what-
So you have no idea if you already gave them back the deposit or haven't given them back the deposit, or?
there is, when Elvira does the bank, when she deposits the money, she puts there, it was for so-and-so deposit, for meter deposit, but when Kathy puts it in this thing, in the computer in QuickBooks, she just puts meter deposit.
She didn't put the name on
She doesn't
the,
put the name, but then, it's also on the waterworks, where it says that they paid $50, and at the end, when they leave, we print final bill, and it'll say, okay, you owe the person $50, they deduct the $50 or whatever deposit they gave or whatever. And then it tells us, okay, so you make out that check, or they owe you, whatever the difference is.
So I recommend that list be put into the general ledger with the bookkeeper.
So that's something we can give to Kathy to just put it in the system from now on in QuickBooks.
And it should be a liability of the city.
so if we have to put it on the agenda or whatever, we gotta get it done.
No, we just give it to her and do it. It's just like our monthly stuff we give her. We can just give her that stuff to just add it in there.
The name.
All right,
Thank you.
so as soon as we get to the comments, we'll finish the audit within a day or two.
Yes, so what do you, when you sent me the email, I thought you wanted us to just go over the audit, and see if we had any questions or spelling, and that's what I did. I thought that's what you wanted.
It was, yeah, and just the recommendations were, I mean, the comments were in there, and
He,
we just didn't know if you approved it or
he
not.
wants you to say, like, the response right here, that he's giving you the response. He's just like saying, you agree to the responses. that the city's gonna implement these
Yes.
new procedures.
Yeah, we just never heard back yes or no on the
He
response.
just needs to know yes or no, the city will take action on it.
Yes. I agree and everything.
Okay,
that-
yeah, I got yours, I sure did.
So you're
That's
just
all.
waiting on the mayor and the commissioner?
Yes, and then we'll be done.
I'll agree.
Okay.
Mhm.
I definitely like the way you presented your audit, sir. Gives us a very good positive insight as to how our city stands right now, as far as the government is concerned. the government city. And I like the way that you know, just by the responses that you put there as your backup, that what has to be implemented, or what can help the city better, whatever it is that we're doing or not doing correctly.
Okay.
Very informative.
Well, thank you. Yeah, y'all did a great job, I appreciate all.
And
of
your
that.
responses are awesome. I mean, I cannot say nay to none of that because you're willing to work with us. And just by those responses, we know that it has to be taken care of that way, that's the way, the proper way to correct things.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
What was the name of that software that you said for
Cloud and
to
what else?
protect
Carbon?
our software?
Carbonite. Yeah, Carbonite. Yeah, we've used it for many years. It's saved my bacon more than once, I'll tell you that. You know, you lose your computer,
Yeah.
oh my gosh.
Our waterworks is backed up to their system over there, their backup over there, their soft hardware, whatever. But the other computers are not backed up.
Right, that's what Adrian said. I put everything on the cloud. It's secure. It's very secure.
It's awesome and it serves its purpose. I mean, you're going to have something there that you know, that if somebody comes and questions it, it's right there. Now, if you come back again next year to do an audit again, you already have all your stuff is already there. It's already the way you want it. You don't have to be searching, you don't have to be questioning or whatever.
In case of a disaster.
Yeah.
natural
Or
disaster.
especially, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, we definitely go.
That's scary to one day just lose all our information and.
It's possible. Very easy, actually. It's easier to lose it than it is to keep it. That's why you use some backup. I would get virus protection, I'd get firewalls. I'd put everything in there you can to protect that. Because there's nothing like not having it.
You need to get on it. We need to be protected.
And there's a few others out there. I think the school uses
No, we do that.
Cisco.
Yeah.
For the cloud, I think there's Amazon.
Mhm. Yeah, whatever you find other cities using, I do it.
Yeah.
When you go to your meetings for cities, the governmental city meetings, find out what they use.
We do.
You wanna make a motion?
You make
That's
a
it?
motion to,
Accept, or is it
as presented?
accept Mr.
Documentation.
Audit report for 2018.
The second one.
Everybody in favor say yes?
Yeah.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
all
much.
the help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your jacket, sir.
Yeah, my jacket, I was gonna say, I know it's gonna be cold out there.
Have a safe drive, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, public comment, Ray, comment?
No, just on that 24,000, is it pretty much like a deficit right now, or it's not accounted for again? I know you guys said.
He wrote it off as he wrote it off, is that, it was that month that we had,
Yeah, went back to the,
back to, they gave them that credit for the sewer that they went crazy and they got
That-
those first bills.
yeah,
But it was just written off, it's just written off at the end
that
of the
was
year.
on just on the sewer portion,
Yes,
there was 430 some,
it was 24,000.
there's 430 some sewer accounts?
Yes, but not all of them, not the, commercial accounts didn't get credited, only the residential.
Residents.
Okay, and how much is it for each sewer account?
Back then, it all depended on the water, remember
think
it
it
was on
was-
the water usage?
Mhm.
So
Re- re-
everybody had a different
Water
amount
usage.
of sewer.
Remember they did that water usage, depending on how much water you were gonna get, that bill? So everybody's was different. Everybody's bill was, was,
Adjusted
adjusted
differently.
differently.
Right, it come out to 24,000.
24,000 for all. What was the minimum at the time? Cause they went back to the minimum,
Yeah.
which was,
What do you-
I don't know how much it was.
Was 2210 back then?
2210, yeah, 2210.
Oh, yeah.
So if they got the water usage that was $80 for, or some of them got $100 and something dollars. So they only got like the 80 difference and they paid the 2210.
Okay. Angie,
No, I know the same question that Mr.
okay, looking to
Martinez had.
again?
I just have one more. Whenever we come and pay whatever we have to pay here at the city, do we have to get a receipt or we don't get a receipt, even if it's 50 cents?
If it's a little one, like for copies and stuff, if they ask for it, we can give it to them. If
Yeah.
it's not, we don't give it to them.
So we have to ask for it.
Well, if you want to receive it.
Yeah.
For those little ones.
Let's say less than $5. Minimum,
Or whatever,
or whatever.
like
mean,
copies, 35
Yeah,
cents.
the copies is what,
We don't get a
35 cents or
receipt for
45?
copies.
35 cents copy?
35 cents a
35
copy.
cents.
You can just put out privacy.
Yeah, if you want.
And that gets deposited under the general,
The,
Anybody needs to come in like for copies or anything that they need.
Like petty cash?
it's like in a petty cash, it's
Yeah.
like in a petty cash.
it gets deposited in the petty cash,
Yeah.
That, well, not deposited, it gets,
added to the petty cash.
yeah, added, and then when they reconcile, then that one is taken off.
Right now.
They take out the petty cash.
Kathy does. She
Okay.
reconciles at the end of the month, whenever we give her all the receipts and stuff, then that's
Motion
where
to
it gets.
adjourn?
So all that money,
I have another question that it's not gonna be taking up too much of your time. You're still under that policy where it takes 2 signatures for signing checks?
Yeah.
He mentioned something about trying to have 2 people sign off on payments instead of just 1 person.
We have done it.
no, I think he was talking about when you're gonna go and purchase something, before they even go and purchase it, to have some kind of report that it's already.
Not only that, but mostly like,
It's like a
you're gonna
PO.
go buy something, yeah, like a PO.
Yeah.
That
That's
is
correct.
approved, like me, for example, I ordered from Staples, and before I could just, Mr. Someone, I'm gonna order from Staples, okay, it was verbal. But he gave me the approval, but it was verbal. So now I need something saying, PO, for example,
Okay,
and he
PO.
signs off on the PO saying, okay, you can order all this stuff, and dated and.
Yeah, because I understand that you need, because I work on POs at school too, and there's like lots of them, but they all have to stand back. You have to have something like a PO attached there before they even look at it. And then you have to call and get quotes sometimes too, so, yeah. In other words, what he's trying, I think, that también to say is that
They're way to build up.
maybe some of this, the guys, or whenever you go buy something, you just forget to bring us that PO or to attach that PO to this, because everything has to be, according to how I do my bookkeeping, everything has to be accounted for.
Well, usually when we go to Alamo, whenever we attach the PO, they need POs at Alamo, KCAG, all that. So we take the PO and we attach the invoice. But it's more like accounts payable when we send the payments. También quiere que.
Yeah, I can understand that, yeah.
Who's approving to send off this.
Or even make a
payment and stuff.
copy of that same PO, but don't you do that and attach it to that?
Well, we have a form that,
Oh, good.
we have a.
And now talking about that with that new system that they want to sell you,
Oh,
that
yeah.
would be great because it has everything separated,
The new system, you were just gonna like scan the invoice and it was gonna go into the system
But see, we still need an approval before we
Yeah,
even
definitely.
buy.
before you even scan it, before you even go and buy it.
But then you have a group there.
But you have the
Yeah.
invoices. Well, we have the invoices.
You just need like three kinds of approvals before it gets done, something like that.
Well, you need a PO,
The PO.
and then for it to be approved by someone, because, I mean, he is the city manager. And then, we order, and then whenever they come in, we just staple it, and then, he wants like whenever they receive the payment, or whenever we receive the invoice, and when we paid it out also, and to be initialed by someone.
pretty good.
There are little things that can be, they'll be implemented, it's like, it's not really.
Yeah, nothing, I mean, like I said, he did a good job, and it's nothing like that was really, that was gonna set us like really off base or whatever, we did good.
It's an extra step, but like, it's to protect you, so it most of the things.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for Mr. Zamora. The last time we had the meeting, you said that the weed eaters were not working, and I don't remember, you said you were gonna fix them or get another ones, has it been done?
Yeah, we sent them out to get them repaired, but they were not repairable, so we purchased 2 new weed eaters.
Where you got it from?
Alamo?
Oh, so you already have them? You already have weed eaters? Because I haven't seen the guys nowhere doing any weed eater on the city property.
Yeah, we got two, and they put them to use.
I said, have they been using it?
Yes, ma'am.
I haven't seen them. They just in certain areas.
They were in the park, and then today they were at the cemetery.
Yeah, Rolando was using one of them. Okay. Motion to adjourn? Anybody?
Mr. Johnson, motion to adjourn.
Second?
Mr. Mayor, second, any favor, say aye.
Thank you all for coming.